Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ep.1 of the Anchor Me Abroad podcast, the podcast for study abroad students who are interested in creating a meaningful journey overseas. I am so excited that you are here, and I'm looking forward to diving into the topic for Episode 1. So in today's topic, we are talking about the recession. And so we're going to be diving into what does that mean for you as a study abroad student, if you're planning to study abroad in 2022 or 2023, or potentially beyond that, because we know that sometimes economic downturns last longer than just a couple years. And then we're also going to start thinking about what are some of the benefits, and yes, I did say benefits, of study abroad during a recession. I could definitely talk to you about my experience of studying abroad during a recession, and I'm excited to be able to share some of that because there definitely are some benefits to being able to study abroad or get any type of education during an economic downturn. So when it comes to thinking about the recession, as I'm recording this, it is July 31st, 2022. And so if you are based here in the United States, you know that on Wednesday, this past Wednesday or this past Thursday, honestly, since 2020, I feel like all the days have blended together in a lot of ways, but you know that it was basically projected that the United States is in a recession. Now, I know that there have been some very partisan attempts to craft this idea that, you know, to put some flowering on it and some sugar on it to say that we are not in a recession and that the definition of is not is, but I won't go down that road. I will just say that I would trust to believe the people who specialize in the economics. To me, this very much looks like what we saw in 2008. Not the same in terms of the reasons why, and it's not coming at the same velocity, but we have to just not live in clown world. Like, that's what I always say. Like, you can't live in clown world. Anyone who has been alive with pulse in their body for the past 24, 36 months, and particularly in the past year and a half as we sort of swung out of the height of COVID and we've had to deal with a lot of the inflation and all those different things, knows that this is not a good situation. And so whether you want to call it a recession, whether you want to bury your head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening, that does not matter. We have to actually live in a world of facts. That's where everyone should be living. And it actually doesn't matter what you're feeling. It's all about the actual facts here. And so for study abroad students, I know that this impacts people in different ways because for a lot of Americans, I know that it was similar in 2008 when we sort of felt like the brunt of it because, again, as our economy is so big and in a lot of ways, we have a lot of debt to other countries, but we also to produce so much here that we felt it really, in a lot of ways, a lot harder. But whatever happens here tends to reverberate around the world. And so you're definitely going to find that I would say I would be surprised if by September of this year, you weren't hearing places like the UK and Canada and other allies of ours say that they were in a recession or heading towards one, because it's usually going to be about an 8-week, if even that, time frame when the other countries feel it. Now, just to give you a little bit of insight to this, and I find that this is just really interesting anyway. I mean, this is always the same case when we're thinking about the American press, the American sort of infrastructure, and what actually happens around the world. So I remember back in 2007 when I was studying in London, and I was really lucky because I was working for CNBC Europe, and so they are the business channel of the NBC brand, and it was based in London. But the great part about doing that is that I was so in tune with what was happening. So the things that they were talking about in terms of how global markets and how the economy was looking really bad. Keep in mind, this was in September of 2007, and the actual recession of 2008 did not really hit until about May of 2008. It was like April or May. So they were about 9 months ahead. And so the different assignments and different types of projects that I got to work on in my internship there were very interesting. And I remember sort of talking to people back home about, are you hearing about this? And they're like, oh no, like I hadn't heard about that. And, you know, when they would come on to do the broadcast, and within my particular job, I was helping several anchors write different scripts and doing different types of editing packages and working in the newsroom in general. So you're exposed to everything in that environment. And one of the things that was so interesting is how they were basically projecting and in a way like forecasting what was happening 8 months ahead of time. And they kept saying that the United States will be first, the United States will be first. And in the United States, people were not talking about that. And it's sort of in the same way when you start looking back on what we've experienced these past few years with COVID and with the economic downturn, that of course, overseas in different parts of Europe, they've been talking about this and how this does not look like a good situation. But of course, here in this country, while on an individual basis, people may be talking about it, as a culture, we are very stubborn when it comes to things like this, and we want to live in a fantasy world where we feel like someone's just going to figure it out. So the government's going to figure it out, or if you're underage, my parents are going to figure it out. No one's going to figure out anything for you, and I think that as a student in particular, you need to be able to take your power back with that and say that you're going to be responsible for figuring out your own life, and that's going to be the most important thing to you. So when it comes to study abroad specifically and recessions, I can tell you that there are absolutely a lot of bad things to think about with the recession when it comes to study abroad, because of course it means that education does become a little bit more out of reach for a lot of people. In the way that I'm saying is that if you are, let's say, even if your parents are paying for everything, maybe they're like, we can pay out of pocket, but we can only pay half out of pocket because we need to save for other things. So the first thing that you'll see is a lot of cutbacks, and education is one of those spaces. Now, it really just depends on where you're going and what you're doing. If you are, for example, here in the US and you are in a state-based school, it may not be as bad for you, because for a lot of students who are going to public universities within their own state, there's a lot of financial support and a lot of financial aid that you're going to have access to, that you would have had access to anyway. But that helps to offset the cost, and maybe you make different changes, such as living at home or doing different things. Whereas if a student is thinking about taking a journey abroad during this time, while there are definitely some downsides, I would say that there is more than anything a high benefit cost. And the reason why I can say this is that I speak from personal experience. As I alluded to a few minutes ago, I was studying abroad during 2007. I also studied abroad in 2008. I very vividly remember being in Italy when all the news of the havoc with the recession broke. And then I went back to London to study abroad in 2009 and 2010, which were still in the middle of the recession. And so I can speak from experience of saying that me personally, and I know for the other American students that were there, they clearly still want to come, that there was a benefit and there was an upside to that. Now, I understand that there is a conversation about the privilege to be able to do that, because I, of course, and most of the students who were there were not doing it alone. So having lots of parental support and financial support and all those things. And I understand that if you are in a spot where you're not going to have that, that could be more difficult. But there's still a lot of opportunity out there. And so throughout the different podcasts on here, we'll be talking about different scholarships and different opportunities, because again, I don't just want to make this a recession podcast. It's not just about the recession, but I did want to start off with this particular topic because I'm launching this in August of 2022, and I would be remiss if I just sort of passed by it. So this is going to be the place where you're going to be able to get different types of information about not just study abroad programming, but also too about finding ways to save money while you study abroad, how to wisely budget while you study abroad, and also how to actually have a great experience while you study abroad. So as we think about the benefits of the economic downturn, and I hate to be like one of those people that's like, oh, this is just all great and it's just going to be wonderful. We know that that is not the case. But the first thing that I always like to remind people is that number one, economic downturn, economic turmoil is both macro and micro, and that everything is ever changing. So I'm sure that you know this. Even in 2008, I have to be fully transparent, I did not feel as much of the brunt of that as just a student being in school and someone who was still financially dependent on my family. My family was not necessarily impacted by it in that way. I feel that as time went on, maybe there were certain things that were impacted, but I know that in a lot of ways, there are different industries that are often impacted by recessions. Some people feel it more than others. Even if they are, let's say, very wealthy, very well off, they may still feel it depending on what they do. So it doesn't mean that because a recession has quote unquote been announced or that it is forthcoming, that somehow you are immediately going to lose everything and life can't go on as it is. For me, I always like to think in terms of you want to live life as it is until you need to switch gears. And so that's what I like to encourage students to do. One of the important things also as well that I want to stress to you out there, and this is important, you hear this all the time when people are thinking of very depressive and dark things, is that you don't want to make temporary decisions for long-term, you don't want to make long-term decisions for temporary problems. So in this instance, what we're saying is you don't just want to sit still and sort of freak out thinking about what might happen if the recession continues or if it gets worse or if it goes on through your entire college career. You can't do that. And you also don't necessarily just want to immediately change your plans. You want to be able to have a way to see if you're able to work within the framework or what is going on. So even if you are interested in looking for a study abroad opportunity and you have heard this news now and you're feeling really nervous about it, don't just put your dreams away in a drawer somewhere and be like, well, I'll just do that once it gets better, because you can't depend on when it's getting better, if it's getting better, and you don't want to just cut off your life because of the external factors happening. Keeping a realistic view, of course, as I said, that I know that everyone is in a different situation, but you also too want to be wise about what you're doing. So in terms of the actual benefits for study abroad in a environment that is not necessarily economically friendly, I would say that the first benefit, and this is keeping in mind, this is specifically for semester programs. I'm going to do another podcast where I talk about for degree programs, because those are two different animals, if you will. So if someone who is signed up to do a degree program, there are lots of different ways to approach that versus semester programs for study abroad. So the first benefit for studying abroad during a recession, if you're in a semester-long program, just to define for you, semester-long program means, let's say you're doing a September to a December, that would be a fall semester or any time in between those months, or you're doing a winter semester, which is going to be, let's say, November to January. They have some of those. Or you might be doing a spring semester, which is January to May. And again, it could be any time within that little window, or you could be doing a summer semester. So that's what I mean when I say semesters. So the first benefit is going to be that you're going to have an opportunity to expedite your elective or core credits, although I typically know that for most students, you are getting elective credits when you're going abroad, at least here in the United States. I know that for some other countries, while you're away, it's a different equivalent of what you would have for credits. But I do know that here in the United States, there are a lot of schools who they focus on students getting their elective credits while they study abroad, and then they are able to supplement their core credits either before they leave or once they come back if they're on semester programs. For me, I was definitely in that same situation. I was able to earn so many elective credits during the year that I studied abroad while I was still in undergraduate studies. But this is a benefit because with elective credits, a lot of times people leave these until the end. And I know how tempting that can be. I think that if I had not studied abroad during that window during my junior year, I probably would have been the same. But this is going to be a good thing because this could potentially set you up to graduate a little bit early, right? And a lot of students don't think of it that way. I know that I've worked with a few students who this is exactly what they've done. So what they would do is they really went very hard in their freshman year of college here in the US, and then in their sophomore year they were really strong. And by this time, I mean, you have to keep in mind that there's a balance here, because I'm not encouraging you to take 24 credits. You don't necessarily want to be that person unless you have the time and the mental bandwidth to do so. But if you are someone who have maybe knocked out most of their core credits for your degree in your freshman and your sophomore year, then you're just looking at elective credits. If you're able to study abroad for a semester or two and get the benefit of not only being able to study abroad, but also have elective credits, that's going to be amazing. Now, I know that you would say, well, why wouldn't I just stay on campus and get the elective credits and not spend the money to go abroad? I totally understand that. But I would just say as well that why would you not want to get to experience all the other things that happen that are positive when you study abroad, in addition to being able to earn your elective credits? So this is really speaking to students who right now, or even if you're listening to this down the road, maybe you're listening to this in early 2023 and you're trying to decide if you want to just study abroad for any time in this year, and you're thinking, well, things are still not good economically. Now, maybe in 6 months from now, where I'm recording this July 31st, maybe on January 31st, we will all be sitting on the beach drinking pina coladas, as one of my favorite content creators says, and I will be wrong and I will have egg on my face, but I think that we know that that is not the case. And so with this particular strategy, being able to earn the elective credits while you're also being able to study abroad and get that experience is going to be very effective. And so I would definitely recommend that if you still want to study abroad during a recession, that you still move forward with your plans despite what's going on. Now, this leads into my next point, because one of the benefits in addition to earning your elective credits while you're abroad is that you are expanding your network. So you're expanding your international network, and with that you are also expanding the opportunity to be exposed to new avenues of potential jobs, potential internships, potential connections. Maybe you also want to do further studies as well. You're able to expand your network in a way that you're not necessarily going to be able to do at your current college campus. Now, I know that depending on where you are, I know specifically here in the United States, there is a lot of opportunity to do that, particularly if you are at a bigger school where there are all these career fairs and job fairs, and a lot of times they will connect you with a mentor and all these different things. But in the world that we live in today, it is definitely much more of an international world. I don't necessarily like the word global citizen, and that makes me cringe. But I will just say that in terms of the international world, I do consider myself an international person, love of international culture, and I respect different cultures and all those different things, and have loved living abroad when I've had the chance to do it, and hope to do it very soon again. And so with that being said, you get to open up something that is going to be totally new to you. So that is the value of studying abroad within itself, but particularly when you're looking at a recession, because again, you have to keep in mind that you may be going to a country that is not as impacted as the country we're coming from. So maybe you are here in the US and you might be studying abroad in a country that is a little bit smaller, and maybe they're not as impacted. They probably will be impacted to a certain extent because, again, most of the markets and the economics around the world are intertwined, but they may have a faster recovery than what your home country has. There may be more of an opportunity to find work there after you finish your graduation. And so what you're doing in this time period is you're going for the semester, but you're just trying to make those different connections, and you're trying to learn about how does it work if I want to come back here and apply for a job, or if I at least want to make my network bigger so that maybe even if I connect with someone and they know someone who's where I'm from, can they help me with something? That is what it is all about. I think that even with networking, and I'm the first person to say that I am not the best with networking in the sense of what is traditional networking. I have a huge network, but it doesn't come from just going to an event and passing out a business card or just standing around and mingling and doing the cheese circuit, all of that. I feel like in a lot of ways that is completely played out in the sense of you don't have to network with people like that every person that you meet is a potential part of your network. Now, we know that there's some people that we meet that we never want to see them again, and that's perfectly fine too. However, you want to treat it like that. And so you don't want to be in a situation where you close yourself off to opportunities. And I think that for a lot of students when they study abroad, particularly in the semester sense, they often think, well, I'm just going back home and then this is all I'm going to do. And it is my job as a study abroad advisor and someone who has extensive experience, not only talking about this, but actually doing it myself, that it's very important to be able to figure out how you can maximize your opportunities, because that is what it is all about, particularly in a world with a recession where things become so much more competitive. Now, that leads into the next point that I have, which is this is going to give you an opportunity to gain competitive resume advantage, as I like to say. So as you would imagine, when recessions happen, things get really tough for a lot of people. We know that unfortunately in this particular instance, it definitely was the case in 2008. But again, that was a different situation. It was not any better. And we don't know how bad this is going to get. But coming out of what we have just experienced as a world, as a country here in the US, around the world, again, as I said, everyone went through COVID at the same time. But if you're looking at it from our perspective here, since the recession was announced here first, and you're thinking about the people who are likely to be highly impacted first, so our frontline workers, for a lot of people who do different things, whether they're working in retail or whatever that is, it just breaks my heart that they are going to get walloped again. You know, they've already been through so much in these past years as their businesses have, shut down for weeks on end, and they've had to go through all these different things of having to get people just to come in the store, and they have to chase after people to wear a mask and all these things that they've had to go through. We know that in a lot of ways they will be impacted first because those are typically the types of jobs that go first. In this particular instance right now that it's going to impact them, but we know that it could be 6 months from now that a lot of those people may be facing layoffs or reduced working hours, and they've already been through so much. But kind of coming back to that is that you don't want to be put in that situation as much as possible. Now, no one can predict the future. So you can't predict the future and say, oh, well, I know exactly once I come out from, unless you just happen to have this sort of hookup, and maybe you do. But even with that, I've talked about this before, that during the 2008 recession, there were a lot of kids from places that were very prestigious, that, maybe they went to Harvard or Yale. They were standing in the unemployment line along with the community college kids, okay? So you have to keep that in mind, that that is not necessarily a guarantee. But this is not per se about where you're going to college. This is more about thinking about your future plans and giving yourself the competitive advantage. And I feel that in a lot of ways, people who study abroad don't necessarily use that to their advantage. They may just put it on their resume, but I feel like a lot of times you don't necessarily even know how to talk about it, or you don't even know how to explain it. And it is something that is still very rare. This is something that really surprises people. Now, if you're an American, you're probably not surprised by that. We are not necessarily the most international savvy people in terms of people do travel, but in terms of actually living in other places and studying abroad, yeah, there is a sector of people that do that, and I work with them, and I did that myself, but it's still a very limited group of people compared to our international counterparts, where, of course, like, why would you not study abroad? Like, of course, and it makes sense to go work somewhere else and do this for 6 months and whatever. Like, it's a totally different conversation. But when you're thinking about your competitive advantage, the first thing, in addition to the job loss that happens, is that one of the things that we know that people do when there is economic downturn is that they flood schools. And so you even saw this during the height of COVID and during the shutdown, where people, I'll just go back to school, I'll go back and do this. Now, I think that is great. I do think that there is something to be said for making sure that what you are studying is going to be relevant, is going to surpass the moment. So you don't want to spend your time getting what I like to call a useless degree, just like a play degree, as I like to call it. Like, I mean, whatever you're going to be studying needs to surpass time. Now, it doesn't mean, for example, we know that during the height of the 2008, 2009 recession, there was this big push to get people into healthcare. And there was an abundance, an overabundance of that throughout these past few years. And we've seen that there's so many people in healthcare that they don't even need a lot of them. Do you know what I mean? And so it doesn't mean that I think that whatever you're doing, I feel that if it's nursing or communications or whatever, just make sure that it's something that can be a lot more broad touching and can be a lot more useful than, let's say, a gender studies degree, which is something that in a lot of ways is going to be valuable, but maybe you want to focus more on the sociology aspect of that so that you can broaden out, because again, that's not necessarily going to be something that is going to be that valuable. And particularly if you're going outside the United States, that's not something that people are going to be like, ooh, like, let me learn more about that. Like, literally no one cares. So when you start to think about it, I realize that I'm being really harsh here in a lot of ways, but I'm just trying to break it down to be very honest. I feel that in any conversation that we have in 2022, or I was like this in 1995, so I don't know what everyone else has been doing, but I feel like you have to have an honest conversation, and that goes for everyone. I have to have honest conversations with myself, but it helps no one to not have the honesty going on. You actually have to have the honest conversations to be able to speak frankly and truthfully, and you have to take your emotions out of it. This is not about your particular feelings. It doesn't mean your feelings are not valid, but it means that if you're going to be an adult, that you actually have to be able to stick to what the facts are. And we are definitely in a post-factual world, just all around. People are just completely overly sensitive. Everyone feels like they need to be validated in some way, and I just don't subscribe to that. And so you'll find on this particular podcast that that is something that you're looking for me to sit here and hold your hand and just tell you, oh, it's going to be okay, and this is that. That is not what I'm going to do here. So I just want to make you very aware of that. But for the competitive advantage, specifically for the resumes, this is going to be something that, not just thinking about one specific resume, but thinking about the fact that you want to make yourself as competitive as possible. So whatever that looks like for you in terms of your future career, I feel that study abroad is going to be one of those things that adds to that factor. Because again, as I was saying before, it is not something that everyone does. So again, it puts you in a little bit more of an exclusive club. Also as well, if you are able to showcase different things that you've done while you study abroad. So maybe you have gone and you have showed that you worked on these big projects while you were studying abroad, or maybe this was some type of mission that you also did while you were studying abroad. So in addition to your classes, you were also volunteering somewhere and you worked on this huge initiative. There are all these different things that are available out there if you're looking for them. And so I would highly recommend that you use it to your advantage. And we will get into in a future podcast about talking about how you actually apply this within an interview and how you place your study abroad experience on your resume. You don't just want to put it on there and just, oh yeah, I did that. Like, you really want to be able to talk that up. And so we will definitely be talking more about that. But this is definitely going to give you a competitive advantage in addition to other things you can do, such as volunteering even while you're at your home campus, or if you are doing other side projects, maybe you are also someone who has a side hustle or whatever you're doing. All those things give you competitive advantage, because anytime you're gaining skills, anytime you're gaining unique skills, it makes you more attracted to future employers, even if it's just for an internship. People love people that have shown the ability to go out and do different things that are not just unique, but also too that are fulfilling, but that don't just fit the mold. So you'll definitely want to consider that too. And then last but not least, I would say that in terms of the personal perseverance and the empowerment that you're going to get, that this is a huge one, particularly during a recession, because we know that you're likely going to be in a situation where you're going to have your belt tightened as well. Even if you are getting help from your family, things may look a little bit different at home. And so as you are living abroad, there are different things that you're going through. And I talk about this a lot in a lot of the different content that I create in my online courses as well, where I talk about the fact of studying abroad is not just a physical experience where you're actually literally going to a different place, but it's also a mental and emotional experience because you are growing and changing as a person just every day. But when you get into a situation where you are in a brand new country, you probably don't know a lot of people. Maybe you know one or two people from your school, or if you're doing a program that's not connected to your school, you probably don't know anyone. There's so much going on. You have to get used to a different time frame. You have to get used to different foods and then interacting with different culture. And a lot of it can be overwhelming. And while I know that if you are studying abroad for a longer time, it impacts you a lot more. Let's say if you're doing your full degree program, you have more time to settle into it. If you are doing a semester program, it often hits you like a brick because you're sort of in it. It's like you are starting out, you arrive in your location, and then let's say you arrive in your location on Friday, and on Monday you're in classes and you're still trying to figure out, how do I get to the metro stop and how do I do all these different things? And I feel like there is some toughness and some perseverance to be built in a way that you're not necessarily going to find if you were just to stay home or just stay on your home campus. There are a lot of things that you learn about yourself while you study abroad and while you live abroad that you're not going to be able to get at home. And I know that that sounds a bit crazy, but it's true. It's just the ability to be able to sort of come out of what you think that you know. This is what I always like to tell people. So, of course, we all go into a situation with our biases and our prejudices and all these different things. But when you actually are in the middle of it, when you're on a study abroad journey, it can be very intense, but it can also be very rewarding as well. And there is some character to be built from that. And particularly for the college students out there, even if you're in high school and you're listening to this, or secondary school, if you're abroad and you're listening to this, there is some honor in building perseverance. You will likely hear me talk about this more when I talk about internships, free internships versus unpaid internships versus paid internships, and how I am a strong advocate for unpaid internships because it builds that perseverance. When you have nothing on the line besides maybe some course credits, you're not going you're not going in every day for a paycheck. You're not there just to build your resume. And so I think that this is a great time to be able to do what you still want to do, even though things are not looking great in the market. So one of the things that I want to hear is whatever platform that you're listening to this on, particularly if you are listening on Apple iTunes, I want to hear, what are some of your thoughts about studying abroad in this time of recession, or we'll just say economic downturn? Because again, as we move along, we'll have to wait and see what other countries are starting to say. But we know here in the U.S., as we are at least mostly saying that there is an economic downturn. How are you feeling about study abroad in this environment? Is it something that you would still want to do? And if you are still wanting to do it, have your particular plans changed? So are you starting to think about different places that you can go that are maybe more affordable, or that are going to be maybe not your dream destination, but something that you can still live with? So I would love to hear your comments, and also too, I love hearing feedback on what I've had to say. I can tell you, I'm so grateful if you're still listening right now that you've listened to this. This is who I've always been. And so even as a little kid, I was the sass mouth in class, sort of talking back to the teacher and telling them why they were wrong and why they didn't make any sense. And so this is nothing new. And so anyone who knows me, particularly in my personal life, knows that this is exactly who I am. But one of the things that people, at least I've heard, particularly more recently, is that they learn a lot from me in terms of how to sort of snap out of it and not to be walked over, and how to go out and have a great life. And so if I can at least influence one person with that, then I have done my job and I feel fulfilled. So I'm so excited that you have found this podcast, and I am so excited to be bringing future episodes to you very soon. I'm going to have to figure out what the cadence is of this. I release YouTube videos over on the Study Abroad Specialist channel, so definitely find that over on YouTube every single Friday. So I'm going to have to figure out what the cadence of this particular podcast is, and I will put that in the description once I know. But at the time of recording this, I have not figured that out yet. Thanks so much for listening, and I will talk to you on the next one.